Hey there. So after shooting this video, I actually did A/B the SSL compressor with the API compressor that's in the box console, and the results were very interesting. I have my opinions about it. I've tacked on the results at the end of this video so you can hear it for yourself. Hey, how's it going? So we added a new piece and I wanted to do a little video about it. It's the SSL 500 series G-Comp. This is the newest Mark III model, which I know it's made in China. Hey, look, I don't really care. It's the same parts from the UK, basically assembled in China, and it's not like the Chinese don't know how to solder and make things, so I don't really see all the fuss, and the price came down, so made it more accessible, and that's nice. This completes this compressor rack, which I'm pretty happy about. Nice stuff in there. And for me, my history with this is I originally bought the Audioscape version of the SSL Buss Comp, and I love Audioscape as a company. Chris is great. I love my Pultec clones and my LA2A clones from them, but that one piece I didn't love. And what I found personally was that I felt like it was emphasizing high mid-range frequencies, like somewhere around 5 to 6 kilohertz, which I didn't like the way that sounded. I felt like it made like snare drums peaky, and I didn't love it. By contrast, I found that that SSL branded compressors tend to push a more low mid-range, so more like a 400 to 800 hertz area, and which just adds more weight to a snare drum. And so I preferred that, and it was really a rare thing. It's the only time ever really for me where I liked the plugin better than the hardware. Like, I have the SSL's native version of their Buss Comp, and so it just felt ridiculous to sit on the hardware when I liked the sound of the plugin better. So I sold that piece, but I've always been curious about, like, well, would this work better with the SSL brand? So, and I know the rack versions are probably even better than this, but I figured this is a low investment way to give it a shot and see if it's any better. So, I'm curious to see, and it'll be interesting. I know tons of people have these things, so I'd be happy to hear your feedback in the comments. For me, functionally, I figured this is going to serve one of two purposes, which is the mix bus. The API box console has this built-in dual 527 compressor. It's great, I love it, but I want to A/B it with the SSL, see which one I like better for the most part, and it may be program dependent. There may be some music that I like one and some music that I like the other. The nice thing is the flexibility of this setup that API made, which is that this is stereo compressor can be unlinked and become two mono compressors, and then it can also, each one individually can be assigned to any of the first 4 channels on the console, so it keeps them useful. And they're great compressors. I would want to use them. So so I have no qualms about replacing that with the SSL Buss Comp, which I would just put in the insert, probably ahead of the DW Fern compressor that I normally lives on my 2-mix bus. So that's one way I may end up using it. The other possible solution is here. So as anyone who's watched my videos knows, I use this SSL X-Desk as a drum sub mixer. I have these 8 equalizers normaled to these 8 channels, so all I have to do is press the insert button and it goes to and back. And what I normally do, what I've been doing is I've been creating a stereo comp send. So instead of putting a compressor on the actual mix bus insert, which I know you can, you can do parallel for that too, but this is even more useful because I'm basically using the Q send here and to send to a stereo compressor, and that lets me really customize the send and emphasize, you know, which instruments from the drums I want to hit the bus compressor, you know, differently, as opposed to just whatever the drum mix happens to be. And I really like having that flexibility, you know, in terms of, and then as a parallel, I have it returning, and then I can roll it in on the return level. And again, it's very dependent on whatever the music happens to want, you know, whether it wants to smack harder or less or whatnot. Just adds a lot of flexibility. So up until now, I've been using the EL7X Fatso from the Empirical Labs, and fantastic piece. I love, you know, the compression and the analog tape simulation, particularly when a lot of the drums I'm using are samples these days. So I love what that adds. But at the same time, you know, the classic use for the SSL bus compressor, if it's not on the main mix, then usually it's on a drum bus. So, you know, if I end up loving it on the drum bus, the nice thing about that is it frees up the Fatso. And I'd really be interested in having that available to put on like electric guitar buses and things like that. I mean, the Fatso does compression, but it's really, you know, I mean, the whole point of it is that it's sort of an analog tape simulator, and that in the harmonic warmth that it generates, I'm a little more interested really in having that on guitars. So, you know, I'm curious. So it'll be one or the other. It'll either be drum bus or mix bus, and I've got options either way. And it doesn't mean anything, but I have to admit I'm a little bit into the idea of having like this dedicated SSL sound on the drums. So yeah, having the X desk and the SSL compressor. I've never really been a fan of SSL equalizers, so I don't see myself changing that ever. But yeah, the API EQs are just amazing, particularly on drums. So so that's probably going to stay. But you know, so much of the SSL sound is the bus compressor. So you know, just having like that SSL thing going on for the drums, you know, seems cool. All right, so that's this one. Again, short video, and you know, hit me up in the comments if you've got that piece or you've got other compressors that you like. I mean, I've certainly already read a lot of opinions about pieces that people like and like better and worse and so on. So please share. And if you haven't already, do please subscribe to the channel. Things are going great with it, and I'm looking forward to a lot more content to come. Okay, so this is going to be the shootout portion of the video. And there's a lot to cover just quickly in terms of the variables and explaining what it is you're listening to. We're comparing, obviously, the API 527s that are built into the box console with the SSL 500 series G-Comp. And the material that we're listening to is just a little song of mine, a vanity project. It is not mixed yet, so it's a rough mix in the box. But it's clean enough. I think you'll be able to make judgments based on it. And so the way that we're doing the comparison is I am piping the 2 mix out of the computer to 2 channels on the API. And fortunately, on this console, on this side of this console, there's a fader bypass switch. So it, you know, that just guarantees that it's coming in at unity gain. And the way that I'm doing it is I have the SSL in the inserts of these two channels. I know this is strange. API goes 1, 2, 3, 4. It's a little odd. It takes some getting used to. Don't worry about the aux sends. We're not doing returns, so we're not hearing anything there. So if I want to engage the SSL compressor, I simply have to press those insert buttons in, and we get the SSL. There are transformers in the inserts of this, so API transformers in the board. So that's something to sort of take note of. But there's also, on this side, when we're using the API compressor, I'm engaging it here. And there is a relationship between the output transformers and the compressor too, which doesn't, which the SSL doesn't get. So in a way, I think it's kind of fair, but it's not apples and oranges, but it's apples and tangerines. I don't know what, it's close. It's close. Actually, on that subject, a beef that I have with AB videos and shootouts in general. I am not trying to make these the same settings. It wouldn't make any sense. They're not the same compressors. So, the way that I do these is I set both devices to what I think sounds best for the material. And in a very practical sense, that is the comparison that's useful to me. Now, unfortunately, you may find that less useful. You may look at it and say, well, if you set this differently, you get a different comparison. What can I tell you? You'll just have to figure out a way to do an AB yourself if you want that. But yeah, what you're going to get is me setting the devices to what works best for me. Now, one more thing to take a note of is on the SSL, there is a makeup gain knob, which is really nice. On the API, there is not, and I really am disappointed by that. I think it's a flaw in the console. I really wish they had included some way to adjust the gain. Particularly since I normally will put other gear on the 2-bus insert, and very oftentimes the auto gain will come slamming into that chain, and I have to take ridiculous measures to keep everything low before it goes there. So that's something I've never been very happy about this situation. So in that regard, gain matching was a little difficult. So I did attempt to do that after the fact, with the captured audio. I did the best I could to match them. So I did not try to match the bypassed audio. I let that just be what it was going to be. So what you're going to be listening to is the first segment. The pink is bypassed and the red is engaged with the API compressor. And it's just a verse from this song of mine. First half of the verse is bypassed, second half is compressed, and hopefully you'll easily be able to hear that. This blue portion is the exact same verse, the exact same split point. The light blue is bypassed, no compression. The darker blue is the SSL. So bypassed API, bypassed SSL, and then I put after that just the affected portions, so the second half of the verse twice, so you can hear a fast switch between the API and the SSL without the bypass in between. And I will be putting still shots of the compressors when they are being featured. And just for your knowledge, the settings in the still shots are the settings that you're actually listening to. So if you want to check those out, that's where they are. I think I have covered it all. I'm sure there was something I've forgotten, but anyway, so enjoy it, and by all means, please leave your thoughts in the comments. It's one of those funny things where something can sound really obvious, I can think my thoughts on something are very clear and obvious, and then somebody will hear something completely differently. So that's always actually really fun and interesting. All right, thanks for playing along. Take care.
I didn't know back at 18 how badly I needed one soul to stick with me through The strings were my only unconditional friends. I didn't know back at 18 how badly I needed one soul to stick with me through thick and through thin. But that's too much to ask for when you haven't grown up yet. The strings were my only unconditional friends. Too much to ask for when you haven't grown up yet. The strings were my only